Hey guys, thanks for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to show you how to make a granny square, which is a very common crochet project. This is the most basic version of it, but there's plenty other designs for granny squares. This is just kind of the most traditional. So you need to start with making a magic ring or magic circle. I typically make a double magic circle just to make sure that the project is very secure at the center. If you need a more in-depth tutorial on how to do a double magic circle, you can find that on my channel and I'll link it here. So I'm just going to wrap a few strands around my hand, go under and pull up a loop, and then I'm going to chain one. And then you just need to grab your yarn and we're ready to go. So we have one chain on our hook right now. We're going to make 2 additional chains so that we end up with 3. This is going to count as our first double crochet. And we're going to make 4 clusters of 3 double crochets. So since this one is our first double crochet, I'm going to make 2 more into our magic circle. So there's our second one. And here is our third one. And then I'm just going to bunch them together so that I can visually see each cluster. So that's one cluster done. And now we just need to chain 2. That's going to be our corner. And we're going to work on our next cluster. So again, we're going to start with 1 double crochet. Here's our second double crochet and our third double crochet. So that's our second cluster. And again, I'm just going to bunch them up so I can see them. And you can see this makes our first little corner here. So this will be our second corner. We're going to chain 2 again and go and make our next cluster. So there's our first double crochet, second double crochet, and our third double crochet. So then I'll just bunch that one up, and now you can see that we have 3 sides and 2 corners so far. So then we're going to chain 2 again for our next corner, and we're going to make 1 more cluster. All right, so here's our third double crochet for our final cluster. We're going to bunch that up. And now you can see that we have 4 sides of our square, and then all of our little corners. We only have 3 so far. And so we just need to make our last corner by connecting it over here. But first we just need to close up our magic circle. So I'm going to pull on the tail end of my yarn so I can see a difference between the 2 loops. So now that we can see that we have a smaller and a bigger loop, I'm going to pull on that smaller loop from the top. And this is going to start closing up that other loop. So then you can see that that just closed up our center here. And now we have this big loop that we just need to pull on the tail end of our yarn to close that one up too. And then I'm not going to do it right now, but you just want to make sure to tie knots back here and weave it in around the back so that it holds really tight. But to make our final corner, I'm just going to chain 2 again. And then we have 2 stitches here and then our chain. And so we need to work a slip stitch into our chain space. Okay, so now we have our square. And this last corner might look a little big right now, but it'll look fine after a minute. So we're just going to chain again to get up to our next row. And so we're going to do 3 chains here. And again, that'll count as our first double crochet of the row. So then we're going to yarn over and go into that corner space from the previous row and place a double crochet there. So we're basically just making more clusters. So that's our second of 3 double crochets for our cluster. So we're going to place one more. So then we're not going to chain to get to our next space because we only chain to make a new corner. So we're going to work our first double crochet of our next cluster directly into the corner from the last row. So I'm going to yarn over and make our first double crochet. And then again, we're making a cluster, so we're going to do 3 double crochets here. And then you can kind of bunch them up again just to visually see each cluster a little better, especially in these corners. So because there's a corner here in our last row, we're going to extend it up here. So we're going to chain 2. And then into that same corner space, we're going to work another cluster. And then we're at a side again, so we're not going to chain here. We're just going to work our next double crochet into that corner space. So again, we're doing our 3 to make it a cluster. And then since this is a corner, we're extending it up. We're chaining 2 and working another cluster into that corner. And then here we're at another side, so we're not going to chain. We're just going to go directly into that space. And since this is a corner, we're going to chain 2 and work another cluster. Okay, so we're on the last side of our square. So we're not going to chain here. We're just going to work our cluster into that last corner. And you can see that the first cluster we made of this round is actually going to complete the loop on this row. So we're doing our first double crochet, the second one, and then our third. And since we already have our other cluster in this corner, all we need to do is connect the two with a chain. So we're just going to chain 2 again. And you can see we have our 2 stitches of that cluster and then our chain. So we're going to slip stitch into that chain. Okay, so now we have our 4 corners here and our 4 sides. So now for our third row, we're going to chain 3 again. And then we're going to do the same thing working into this corner space, doing our first cluster. So that's our second double crochet and then our third double crochet. And then again, now you can see that we're working on our side, so we're not chaining. We're just going to work our cluster into that side space. And then we're still working on a side, so we're not going to chain here. We're just going to work another cluster. And then here is our corner. So we're again going to extend this up. We're going to chain 2 and work another cluster directly in that corner. So now I'm just going to work the rest of this round, and you can follow along and I'll meet you back at the end. Okay, so we're working our last cluster into the corner here, doing our 3 double crochets. And then again, to end off this row, we're going to have to chain 2 here and go back into our chain space with a slip stitch. And you can just keep repeating these rows for as long as you want. It'll continue to get bigger and bigger, and you just repeat until you have the size that you need for your project. But that's how you make a granny square. Thanks for watching.